Is it possible for the staffing industry to get to a point where we can stop chasing prospects?
It's a great question, and the short answer is absolutely yes. The longer answer is you need to have a couple of things in place in order to be able to do that.
Like what?
So the first part is that you've got to have the right mindset. You've got to have the belief that says chasing prospects is ineffective and inefficient, and it is not in their best interest, nor is it in your best interest. And then you've got to have the technique to be able to pull it off. Techniques only go so far because techniques are all about tactics, about wording, about what do you say. But if you don't have the mindset to support it, what we know about how the mind works is that your lack of belief in that will cause you to not do it. Your beliefs are going to cause your actions.
So what's the ideal sales mindset to have?
Well, the ideal sales mindset is that you are equal to the prospect. You're no better than them. You're no lower than them. And I think a lot of salespeople, unfortunately, come in and believe that since the prospect has the money, that they have to do whatever the prospect wants. And that is not the case. You really need to have what I would call an equal business stature, which means that we are equals, we are peers, even if you make way more money than I do, or even if you have a much higher level in terms of your presence in a company than I do. But if I have something that is of benefit to you and your company, then that makes us peers. Now, when we go and we have a sales conversation or we're having a prospecting conversation, if I see myself as equal to you, then I know that yes, your time is valuable, but mine is as well. I'm not there to beg for your business. I'm not there to just do whatever it is that you want me to do. I've got to have a process that I know is efficient and effective because as a salesperson, I've got one job really. And that job is to get you to make a decision about whether or not we should be working together and to get you to do that as quickly as possible. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean my time frame. That means we got to figure out what the right time frame would be based on the size of the prospect and what the deal is and all sorts of other parameters. But that's generally what a salesperson's job is just to help someone, guide them to make the right decision for them. Now, the thing to remember about that is that decision is not always going to be a yes for you. Sometimes it's not a yes. And, if you've been in sales for more than a day, that's how it goes. And you've got to be comfortable with that. But getting a decision in a short time frame is one of the most important things to do.
How do we push a prospect to a decision? So I'm thinking about the newer sales reps who sort of just leave things in limbo. I haven't heard no, so there's still a chance, right? There's still a chance they might say yes to this. Are you saying that we should instead push somebody to make a decision, whether it's yes or no, so that we can move on to the next one?
I wouldn't say push. I wouldn't use that word because that makes it overly aggressive. What you want to do is you want to guide them to make a decision. However, in order to do that, you need to know as a salesperson, what is the likely decision? Number one, what should this prospect be deciding about? Because depending on where you are in your sales cycle, let's pretend that it takes 3 meetings in order to get a yes or a no. Then I need to know in each meeting what decision needs to be made in meeting 1, in meeting 2, in meeting 3. They're going to be decisions on different things. So meeting 1 could potentially be a yes or a no on a second meeting. So if that's what I've decided in my sales process needs to happen, that's what's going to make the most sense, then I need to guide you to make that decision. And I've got to tell you that is the decision to be made today. And I think that too often, salespeople, since if you haven't been trained and you haven't been taught this sort of thing, and you just kind of get thrown in because you got a great personality, people like you and you like to talk and you're excited about what you do and all of that, then you just go out there and you talk all about your service, and then you kind of just hope and pray that somebody's going to give you an answer at some point. But that idea, that holding out, that if they haven't told me no, there's still a chance. What we know and what more veteran salespeople know, even though sometimes they don't necessarily execute on it either. But what we know is that just because someone hasn't told you no doesn't mean that they're not thinking no. You know? So what we need a solid answer so that the salesperson doesn't have to go waste their time chasing after somebody, because sales is really about being efficient and effective. Those are the two things you're looking for. The more efficient you can be, the less time it takes to close a deal, the less time you have to follow up, follow up, follow up. Sales cycle gets shorter, and you know who to focus on and who not to focus on.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about it from a marketing standpoint too. In my vision is marketing and sales should be married together so that they're working in unison.
Yes.
Marketing, we're always looking for the next step, right? So you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to close you today, but can I funnel you to download an ebook, to get you to have a conversation, to nudge you down the path? Can I post on social to get you to do this, to then do that, to then do this? And it's this sort of linear, I guess it's not linear because it kind of goes ups and downs. You have ebbs and flows path to get the prospect into your funnel. Marrying that to sales, it is rarely a one-call close in staffing, and we all know that. So I think the mentality of saying, okay, well, knowing they're not going to say yes to the deal today, what does yes look like to nudge them down the line? I love that thought, and I love that idea.
Exactly. And I love that example of what happens in marketing, that there is always that next thing. What action do we want this particular prospect to take? Because once we know that action, then that's what we're going to put in front of them. So if you want somebody to download something, you put a link in front of them to download. You don't just kind of go like, oh, hey, maybe they'll ask me if they can download something, if we have something.
Right.
But sales, on the other hand, will do it where it's like, well, we know that the end is, a yes or a no on a deal, but we'll just sort of like keep it wide open and not guide people toward that. And that is, I believe, one of the biggest mistakes that salespeople make, because the more you have in your pipeline of stuff that is just not solid, that you have no answers on, a really, really big pipeline is the biggest thing that makes salespeople not prospect, because they go, look, I got $1 million in the pipeline that could close at some point. I'm still working on them because none of them have told me no. So what do you not do? You don't prospect, because prospecting is really, the most uncomfortable thing for salespeople to do besides asking for money. Most salespeople do not want to prospect because it's difficult. So it's really, really important, if you're going to get really efficient and also help with your closing percentage, bring that closing percentage up. Figure out what the decision should be that is made each time. And it's different each time. But you've got to guide them. Otherwise, you are leaving yourself in the arms of the prospect, who can lead you around, dance you around, ask you for this, redo a proposal, come do this, come do that. I'll talk to you in 2 months, call me back in 6 months. And you're literally, they're like the puppeteer, and you're just following them. The salesperson has to take the lead. But in order to take the lead, you have to know what you're leading on.
I'm a huge proponent of controlling the controllables and controlling what I can in my own life, right? And I very rarely want to leave the decision up to you or somebody else to say, okay, this is where we're going to go after this conversation, after whatever. And I want to control as much as I can. Maybe that's a character flaw. I'm okay admitting it on the show, but it's something that we're actively working on. And I like the thought of saying, listen, let's regain that control in the sales process, because we know right now it's incredibly difficult to close new orders in the staffing industry. Not only is it incredibly difficult, but if we're relinquishing those controls to the prospect, it's going to get even harder to close in the staffing industry. Rochelle, I want to ask you about this. So we're going to drop this episode in January. How can we have the right mindset going into 2025? So we know statistically it was a tough year for the industry in 2024 in terms of closing new business. How might we start fresh in 2025 and come into the year with a fresh sales mindset?
Well, that's a big question, because there's a lot of stuff that
you got a big answer.
So I think the most important thing to remember about mindset in general is that your emotions create your actions, which create your results. So if you want different results, you don't go back to actions. You don't go back to, let me do more of something, more cold calls, more email prospecting, more whatever. You go back to, what are the emotions that drove those actions in the first place. The emotions are the things that create the mindset, that create that belief system. And so, the one thing is, there was if anybody's watched Ted Lasso, there is a little clip in there where he talks about goldfish, that you've got to have the memory of a goldfish, which means like a 2-second memory. So 2024 was challenging. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's a new year. You can't pull the past into the future and say, because that was a challenging year, this is going to be a challenging year as well. New year, new you. You got to move on and really look at, where are you focusing your thoughts? Because those thoughts create emotions, create actions, create results. So if the thoughts are on, wow, it's hard and nobody's calling back and nobody has money and all that sort of thing, whatever you're focused on, you will see more of. Because our brain also has this reticular activating system, RAS, which is basically the simple, concept behind that is, if you decide that you want to go buy a red BMW tomorrow, all you're going to see are red BMWs on the road. 2 weeks ago, you rarely ever saw one. But now that you're focused on it, you see it everywhere. So when you're really thinking about mindset, what are the thoughts that your mind is focused on? What are the things that you keep rolling around in your head? If you don't want that thing to occur, then stop focusing on it. Now, it doesn't mean it won't occur, but the likelihood of it is much, much slimmer. So if you don't want another challenging year, stop talking about a challenging year, stop talking about last year, stop talking about what did or didn't happen, and start focusing on what you want. If humans just focus more on what they want instead of what they don't want, there'd be a lot more great things coming to people.
Yeah, you're preaching the gospel to me over here. I'm a huge Napoleon Hill fan. I read Think and Grow Rich every January, and there's a quote in that book that says, what the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. And I think we as humans, right, it might be easy to get down on ourselves, see all the negatives, see whatever. But in the case of the BMW, and our CEO tells that story all the time as well. So I don't know if maybe you and David were at a session one time together and he stole that from you, or maybe you stole it from him. But I've heard the red BMW story before, which that's why I started smiling when you said it. You certainly see things around you that you want to see, right? You want to reaffirm your beliefs. So if there's something that you want to do, you want to get in shape, you want to have more money in the bank, whatever, you'll start to see more reasons to surround yourself with that sort of mentality. And I love that about the way that the mind works. So I am all for that. I am aligned with where your head's at in terms of mindset for 2025, and I hope our listeners are as well. When we started here and we started talking about how we can stop chasing prospects, you outlined, I believe, was 3 different areas. So mindset was number 1. What was the second?
The second one was having the tactic or the technique to actually pull that off.
So let's talk about sales techniques. When we think about what makes the ideal sales rep in the staffing industry, what techniques do they need to have?
Well, first off, you've got to have great questions. And you need to remember that your job is really more of being an investigative journalist than it is being a presenter. You're not there to present what you do, how long you've been around, how many offices you have, all the companies you've worked with. Nobody cares about any of that stuff if they don't believe you can solve their problem. So the first thing you've got to do is have a great list of questions, open-ended questions, to really figure out, what is the problem that this particular person/company is having? What are they experiencing? What are the issues? And then you can, start to deal with, how do you solve those? Most salespeople lead with the opposite. They lead with, here's all the things that we could do for you. Here's how long we've been around. Nobody cares if you've been around 5 years, 50 years, 2,000 years. Nobody cares about that. That's not why they're talking to you. And so you've got to have that great list of questions. You've got to have a process and predetermined what your sales cycle looks like, or what you ideally want it to look like. And where it comes down on that is, you've got to know the different types of prospects that you have. And so everyone is going to have something. You can think of it like squirrel, deer, and elephant. Squirrels are your little teeny tiny ones, right? That are in terms of, deal size, revenue coming in. It's a small number. those you should be able to close very, very quickly. Then you've got your deer, those are your mid-size, and then you've got your elephants, which are your big deals. Now, your big deals are generally going to take longer to close than your squirrels, and they should, because the bigger ones, the elephants, are more complex. There's more people involved, there's more money, all sorts of different things. So you want to make sure that number one, you figure out how many of each one do I need? How many squirrel, deer, and elephant do I need to close in 2025 in order to hit whatever my goal is? Then I've got to figure out how many sales calls does it take for each one, and what are the decisions that need to be made along the route? Because that allows me to guide that entire situation, the sales cycle, as well as the sales calls, and get the clear future every time, which is, what we had originally talked about. So those are some of the, generally if I were to pick just a couple of techniques, being able to question really well and being able to control the outcome and guide the outcome and control the way that the sales cycle runs are going to be two of the best things that people can do to really improve their selling.
One thing that I see consistently with marketing as it relates to the sales function is the industry as a whole, maybe as a stereotype, wants to create marketing that is incredibly self-serving. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan, so start with why, right? People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, but it's the golden circle, right? The industry as a whole, though, sells what they do. So we're thinking out here, but everyone cares about why you do it and how you do it, right? So I think it takes a lot of courage to shake up the industry and say, listen, we've been selling this way forever. And candidly, it's not working anymore. We need to think about why. We need to think about what's in it for the end prospect. We need to think about what's in it for the end individual, not necessarily what's in it for us. Because in theory, no one really wants to work with a staffing agency. They want to make sure their machines are running. They want to make sure that their hospitals are meeting quota. They have problems, they have needs, they have challenges. How they facilitate those needs and challenges is a different conversation. But at the end of the day, they have their own pain points and their own challenges that we then can help with. So super, super interesting thought process there.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you can get more prospect focused and less about you, the better that sales call is going to be. I mean, think about it. Everybody likes to talk about themselves the most. We are the most interesting people, we think, to everyone else. So when you get that prospect talking, when you've got really, really good questions that you've developed, that the questions allow you to show your knowledge in the industry. It's the questions you ask that show how smart you are, not all the dumping of the knowledge, because frankly, anyone could come into the staffing industry, learn some things for 3 or 4 months and dump a bunch of knowledge on somebody. It doesn't take anything. They could come from a completely different industry and sell into that easily just by memorizing some lines, just by, kind of figuring out how the business runs. That doesn't take a great skill set. A 10-year-old could come do that. The skill set of really, really well-developed salespeople all comes in the pointed questions that they ask and that they go deep on those questions. It's not surface questions, that they're asking layers deeper, layers deeper, layers deeper. And what it does for the prospect is it makes them actually feel like you care. And that's the most important thing because, salespeople kind of get a bad rap. Everybody knows or believes that when a salesperson comes in, they're going to try to talk them into buying something that maybe they don't need, buying too much of something. They're going to somehow like voodoo mind twist them into saying yes when they don't really want to. There's all these stereotypes. So one of the most important things to do is to knock down that stereotype in the very beginning. And the way that you do that is by coming in and asking questions and saying, look, I don't need to talk about myself. Let's talk about you first. And then we'll figure out if what we do, if our services can help solve the issues that you have. Because if we can't, none of the other stuff matters. It doesn't matter how much we are. It doesn't matter how long we've been around. It doesn't matter how we do it. If we're not the right fit to solve the issue or we don't understand what the issue is.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope if you're listening now, you go back and listen to that a second time, because I think there's a lot of really good piece of information in that run there from Rochelle. we typically sell and we're competing on what it is that we do. And we sell very in a self-serving way. And I think it's interesting if you sit down at a table or you're at a networking event and there's only the table's full, but there's one individual who is just strictly talking about them, talking about their weekend, their kids, their family, what they like, their hobbies, interests, whatever it might be, their talents. That's the first person you want to get away from, right? It gets to a point where it's like, listen, I can't do this anymore. And if we're on a sales call and it's all about us, our prospects are doing the exact same thing. They're running away from us. We're scaring them because they want to have a say at the table as well. They want to talk and they want to talk about themselves. So it is a two-way street. And I think we often forget that. Rochelle, I want to ask you this. When we think about peeling back the layers of the metaphorical onion and we start asking those deeper questions for our prospects or our potential clients, is that coachable, or is that something that comes just from having a good sales mindset and having the right skills to be in a sales role?
No, it's totally coachable. As long as the person is coachable. Not all people are coachable, but skill sets are absolutely coachable. And it's really looking at strategy. What is the strategy of the questions that you're asking? Why are you asking certain questions? And what is the outcome, or what are you trying to accomplish with that question? So it's not just like, let me throw out a question, hey, what's your biggest issue? What's been the biggest problem in finding people? You've got to think about, how do I put these questions together in a structured way? So it takes a little bit more, thought and planning. But the beauty of it is yes, it's absolutely coachable. And there's all sorts of ways to get trained on that. And it's not hard. Once you get the concept of it and you understand the levels that you're trying to get to, it's very easy. Then what great salespeople do is they have all the different questions and then they just add to it. So they go, and for whatever situation it is, or different roles might have a little bit of different questions. If you're talking to the hiring manager versus an HR person, you might have slightly different questions. If you're talking to a CEO versus a mid-level manager, that might be different questions. Slightly different, concept still the same. Questions change because the role has a different outlook in the business. And so you've got to, make sure that you keep that in mind. But once you get your question set, you put that into a document. And then every time you go and you prepare for a sales call, all you have to do is go, okay, which questions make the most sense for this person in this situation? And now I can pre-call prep, which most salespeople don't do. Most just kind of go off the top of their head. Another issue, but I can pre-call prep really, really easily because I did all the upfront work, months ago. And then some of the questions that I ask that I find like they're not getting me, anything, they're just really not working, I just dump those, throw those away. Don't ask that one because I've already tested it on 10 people and, the question's not getting me any information. It's just not working. Okay, no problem. I can dump it. And if I have enough sales calls, I can really test out these questions and figure out which ones work really well and which ones don't. It's just like, in marketing, you do A/B testing. What copy works really well? What do people respond to? What do people not respond to? And salespeople kind of, I think thinking of sales with a little bit of that marketing mentality would be really helpful to a lot of salespeople. It's not just talking. It's not just, you're a good presenter, so go talk and people like you and then you're going to be able to sell. That's not how it works.
Yeah, I come from a music background, and in a lot of talks that I've given, have sort of ended every talk with a set list, right? These are the things I talked about, and here's my set list. And I've also used a set list when I speak because my slides follow a certain cadence, right? And as you were talking and you're thinking about, okay, these are sort of the 7 questions we always ask, and then we have sort of these plug and play. When I'm in Detroit, I have this song that gets added to the set list, or I'm in Buffalo, this song gets added into the set list. I love the thought of making that music analogy of saying, okay, this is our 7-song run. We always play these 7 songs. These are the 7 questions we will always ask. But if the band's feeling it, we'll play these 2 songs too, or we'll encore with these 2, right? If the conversation's going this way. So friends, my way to tie some music back into Take the Stage here for a little bit. But I really do like that thought.
Analogy. That's a great analogy.
I really do like that thought.
Yeah, and what I love about it too is you're playing off the audience. So if you're in a band, you're going to play certain songs because you look at the audience, you get the feel of the audience, and you go, I think in Buffalo, this is going to go over really well.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
the same thing is happening. An HR person is going to get different questions, like I said, than a hiring manager because they have different outlooks, they have different roles. But you always have your standard questions that you're always going to ask no matter what. And then you've got your more tailored questions that you add in. So it was a great analogy. I might
Yeah.
steal that one actually.
You're welcome to it. I also like that there's an out. So in the same respect, right? If you're playing too many high energy songs, you need to bring it down. You need to give people a chance to breathe. There are sales calls that are not going to go the way you want them to go, and you need to deviate from the plan. And if you
Yes.
know, okay, if this happens, comedians do this really well. If they get heckled, they immediately go into a heckling bit, right? They know what they're going to say when they get heckled. That's not impromptu. They know what they're going to say. So if the conversation starts to get away from you on a sales call, know what sort of song or bit you can plug into to still save the sales process, but get you to at least that next stage of the sales process, get you closer to the yes in that instance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've talked mindset, we've talked technique. Anything else we should break down on today's conversation?
Well, the last thing that any salespeople needs is the behavior part. And the behavior part is what are the actions you're taking to get in front of people? Because you can have technique all day long. You can have, like, I know how to get a clear outcome, how to get a clear future. I know the words to say, I have the questions to ask. You can have the great mindset to do it. But if you haven't done the work to get in front of the people, well, you're not getting paid anything. You're not going to, you eat what you kill. You're not going to eat that month. And so the behavior part of it is really important as well, that you've got to take action and you've really got to think about who is your ideal prospect? Where do they hang out? Whether it's online, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, or wherever that may be, or networking. What are you also really good at doing? Most salespeople have one or two prospecting activities that they do really, really well. But what they do is they do those two things, and then there's others that they'll force themselves to do, but they're not that good at, but they force it anyway. And what I would say is, I mean, that's okay to do as long as you're willing to put in the work to get better at it, which means you're going to have to do a lot of reps in order to get better. Or you look at, how do I take the two activities that I'm really good at, that I know I get prospects from, and let me just do way more of that so that I get a higher return for my effort, rather than trying to, cold call people. And I'm not saying don't cold call, because it does work if you do it right. But most people do it very poorly. And then they're like, well, see, that's why that didn't work, because, nobody ever answers the phone. And, we make up all these things, all these reasons why it doesn't work. So you can learn to cold call very effectively, but you're going to have to do a lot of it so that it just becomes really simple for you, and you know how to navigate all the, hang-ups and the no's and the we got somebody's and all that sort of stuff. And you can do that with no emotion. But if there are other things that are really good that you're good at, focus on those and just do more of it and see if that gets you all the prospects you need to get into your funnel.
What would you say to the newer sales rep who's listening, who has a sales manager saying, this is how we do sales here, right? So we have this process, we have this system. And I'm specifically thinking about, okay, if you're really good at these 1 to 2 areas, but your sales manager is saying, yeah, but we really need to do all of this too. How do they control the conversation in their next one-to-one to say, I understand this is sort of the vision for the sales role, but I'm really good here. I want to do more of this.
You got to have numbers. First of all, I would say do whatever your boss says in the beginning.
Sure. Sure.
because
we do want to stay employed.
Yeah, you do want to stay employed, and that's always good. Also, if you're brand new, you coming and saying, I understand that's what you want me to do, but I want to do this, is not going to go well, and I would not recommend that to anyone. So I would say do what your boss is asking you to do. However, if it's something that you don't know how to do, you've got to ask for the help. What is the wording? What have you found works the best in a 30-second commercial on a cold call? If they're asking you to do it and you've never done it before, don't sit there and be like, oh, yeah, I'll do it. and then fake your way through it because you feel embarrassed that you don't know how. You just say, look, I've never done cold calls before. Can I get some sort of a script? Do you have one? Or can I create something? Or can I get trained on how to do it so that I do it really effectively? And then you've got to keep your numbers. So if you've got proof that, let's say you're great at networking, that every time you go to a networking event, you meet 10 people and those 10 people turn into 5 conversations and 2 of those turn into deals. Well, then you can go to your manager and say, look, I've been doing the cold calls. Here's my numbers on that. I also do networking, which I'm really, really good at because I've honed it and I also love it. Here's my numbers on that. Would it be okay with you if I put more emphasis into the networking than the cold calling? Because once you have numbers, which unfortunately most salespeople don't keep their numbers. They go, they do stuff, they have no idea. If you ask them their closing percentage, they have no idea what it is. They take a guess. I don't know, 70%. Anyone that says, I don't know, 70%, it's usually like 20%. So
multiply by 3.
Got to know your closing percentage because that tells you where you need to improve. And then you've also got to know how much activity it takes for you from a prospecting perspective, how much activity it takes for you to get in front of somebody and actually get a sales call or a sales meeting. Because that also tells you how many sales meetings do I need each month? Because I know what my close rate is. So if I want to close 5, I need, I got a 50%. I need 10 new prospect meetings a month. Well, where am I going to get them from? I know I can get 3 from networking every month. Okay, I got 7 more. Where are those going to come from? So you got to have the numbers, and that tells you what you're really good at. So it doesn't just become like, I like to do it and I think it works, but I don't really have any, research, any data. Always go to your sales manager with data and they will definitely respond to that versus this is what I want to do or what I'd like to do.
Yeah, that's certainly a common theme from all of the sales-focused conversations that we had on this show specifically. So back in 2024, if you're new to Take the Stage, we put out 26 episodes. Every other week, we publish a new episode. We did have some people talk about the sales function and sales role and how to improve that. Data was an overwhelming talking point of how to succeed, right? We're flying blind. We're flying on hopes and opinions. And honestly, we can't bring opinions to that conversation. We need to know what enables us to close. We need to know what's working. More importantly, we need to know what's not working because we need to either A, improve that or punt it and do more of what is. I'm a full supporter of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rochelle, before I let you go, I want to give you the floor to share a little bit about yourself, share a little bit about your organization and how you can help individuals in the staffing and recruiting industry.
Sure. Well, my company is Bulletproof Management, and we have been helping companies in staffing for 25 years or so, all different size companies. And what we really focus on is sales, leadership, and management. How do you sharpen the skill set of the people that you already have who are pretty good or very good and just need that next level of cutting edge? And how do you do it in a way where it is repeatable? It is customizable to the company and kind of the company's outlook and how you go to business and to learn repeatable habit building skills around that so that at the end of the day, you bring more revenue in. And it's really about creating efficiency and effectiveness within companies.
Fantastic. And before I let you go, I got to run you through our rapid fire round if you got another minute.
Sure.
One piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting in staffing and recruiting?
I think, I go back to a motto that I came up with many years ago that I've said to my kids forever and ever, which is just laugh a lot, learn a lot. If you go through life and you're laughing and you're having fun and you're seeing the humor in some of the things that you do and things that other people do, you're just going to have a more enjoyable life in general. And the other piece is just learn as much as you can. I think that, we kind of come in a world where you make it through high school, you make it through college. If you went to college and then it's like, I'm done. You're not done. You're never done. And understanding that and having the humility to say, I want to learn more. I want to get trained. I want to create a new skill set. There's something to be said. Those are the people that are growing all the time. So just laugh a lot, learn a lot every day. Pick one thing you can laugh at and one thing that you can learn that day. And if you've done that, then, you're going to have a pretty successful life.
Love that. And one book that has fundamentally changed your life.
Oh, there are many, many, but the most recent one would be called The Emotion Code. I actually have it right here. It's this book right here by Dr. Bradley Nelson. And the interesting thing about that, this goes back to the idea that emotions create actions, which create results. And the premise of this book is that we have negative experiences in our life throughout our lives, from the time, we're born up until now. And many of those, when we have them, the emotions get trapped in the cells of your body, because we do carry emotions in the cells of our body. And so what happens is those things that happened in the past affect our present and our future. And there is a particular way that you can release those emotions out of the cells of your body so that you no longer get triggered by particular people, circumstances, experiences. And it's just a fascinating book that really delves into a scientific based version of looking at mindset and why you do what you do. So it's a great book.
Sounds incredibly, incredibly informational. And honestly, friends, I say this every episode, as much as we're telling you what books you need to read, we're really just building my own book library over here. So Rochelle, it'll be in the Amazon cart this afternoon. I appreciate the recommendation. Cannot thank you enough for coming on this episode of Take the Stage and sharing all your insights with us, Rochelle. It was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here. Thank you.